Welcome to the Boneyard with Steve Robertson. As always, I am your good friend and host, Steve Robertson, here on the magnificent Monday edition of the Yard. The Boneyard is brought to you by Bulldog Burger Company, longtime sponsors for this show. We love them. They love us. They love you too. Maybe not as much as I do, but they do love you. Go by there and check them out. 3 great locations to serve you. University Drive in Star Vegas, Gloucester Street there in Tupelo, Lake Harbor Drive in the Ridge and Flowwood area. Go by, have the spring rolls as your appetizer. They will make you better looking. Trust the science. Get that great restaurant quality hamburger. Last week I had 2. I had the Bryant and the Mississippi Barbecue Burger. Both were absolutely, in the words of Ben Howland, phenomenal. 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 Go by, check them out. You'll be glad you did. They're going to do a great job feeding you as you put your feet under their table. We're going to have a different format today. So we're going to go ahead and knock out our ads early because no top 10 list today, no game recap, nothing like that. We're going to go ahead and just kind of talk about the state of state, kind of give you up to date, what's going on, Mississippi State football program. How about that? So with that said, let's thank our friend Blair Chandler at closewithblair.com. That's C-L-O-S-E with Blair, B-L-A-I-R.com. Blair Chandler is a mortgage professional. If you got mortgage needs, look out for Blair because he'll look out for you. Give him a call or text today at 601-500-2344. Again, that's 601-500-2344. Blair is the guy that can get things done. He has seen it all and done it all in 22 years of experience in the mortgage industry. Recently made the move to Priority One Mortgage. That's what happens when guys get things done. There's opportunities for them to make moves, and Blair made one. And again, that's 601-500-2344. Don't forget our friends at Campus Book Mart. I will be there soon. We got a new book coming out, be released a week from today. And they'll be stocking it at Campus Book Mart. And you can go ahead and order all my books. They have all of my books there. And so if you want to wait till next week to buy the book direct from Campus Book Mart, you can complete your Steve Robertson collection in one handy click of the mouse. Campus Book Mart, a Starkvillian institution. Next time you're in town, go by and check them out. You'll be glad you did. If you can't make it to town, visit them on the World Wide Web at campusbookmart.net. And by being a loyal Boneyard listener, we'll give you a phrase that pays. That's BSR, which stands for Beautiful Steve Robertson. That gets you free shipping on all orders over $75. Any order less than 75 bones, absolutely incomplete. Yeah. And finally, this weekend, if you're looking to come to town, the Stark Vegas Clubhouse is available. Google Stark Vegas Clubhouse and book through the Evolve website. We'll save you a little money. Promo code with them too, BSR10. Get you 10% off your stay. You book through another service, I can't help you there. But booking through the Evolve website, which is the most competitive website, more times than not, gets you 10% off just by being a loyal Boneyard listener. A great place to stay, whether you're bringing a work group to town, you want to have everybody under one roof, yeah, that's great. And not to mention, come for ball games, whether it be basketball, baseball, football, whatever, instead of renting 5 hotel rooms, you can rent this magnificent property. It is the renovated clubhouse at the old country club. And now it's got 2 wet bars. It's got a great fire pit area, huge living room, dining area. And how great would it be for mom to have all of the kids and grandkids under one roof? That way she can make breakfast for everybody. Cinnamon rolls all the way around, courtesy of grandmother when you stay at the Stark Vegas Clubhouse. You won't have the ability to do that at a hotel room. Everybody will be kind of cordoned off, and it's going to be so much more expensive. Again, Google the Stark Vegas Clubhouse and book through the Evolve website, promo code BSR10. All right, so, here's your game recap. Xavier Thomas runs the opening kickoff back. There is glee within the Mississippi State fan base. And then we were terrible the rest of the game, and we lost. That's your game recap. Now, I'm a guy that I try not to get emotional during games, and if I do get emotional, I try not to share it on social media or on the message boards. I know there are some people that would like for me to get out of character because they think, hey, well, if Steve feels this way, I'm justified in feeling the same way. And maybe that's a narcissistic view, But I understand that's the case. But at halftime, I kind of broke character. And I posted on our message board, this cannot continue. I think we were all in one accord at that point. No, this cannot continue. Now, I was told early last week that the administration had cleared the way for Zach Selman to make whatever changes he felt necessary to our football program. On Tuesday, I was told it was simply a matter of time. Now, based on how the team played on Saturday, it was apparent it was time, and perhaps it was apparent that people already knew. Because outside of that initial kickoff return from Zavion Thomas, we did not play with much fight. The biggest thing about the Zack Arnett era that I will say here and elsewhere to the end of time is that we didn't look prepared. And that is on coaching. And I think that is a fair characterization. At times we didn't line up properly. We have players that run the wrong routes. I'm not going to throw a player under the bus, but I've had some people tell me that when you see two receivers in the same area, it's generally because of the same guy. Well, my question with that is, why run him out there? Why keep running him out there if he can't perform the duties required of his position? I don't care how talented he is. I don't care how much NIL money he's collecting. If he can't perform or is unwilling to perform at the level necessary to move this team forward, that is an indictment on the coaching staff. Period. Now, I'll also say this about Zach. And I think it's important before we get too deep in the reads today that we acknowledge this. I have read some comments on social media that I am not proud of and I do not support. And those are those that are filled with anger and angst towards Zack Arnett. Zack Arnett simply didn't win enough. Period. Zach didn't attack the fans. Zach didn't call out the administration. Zach didn't make excuses. Zach didn't ask for this job. We went to Zach in our time of need. And Zack Arnett stepped up and said, okay, I'll take on the responsibility. Yes, we had a veteran team returning. Yes, we had a favorable schedule, and we didn't win. But I would submit to you that nearly every decision Zack Arnett made prior to toe meeting leather, as the illustrious Hound Dog likes to say, was the right decision. Now, one could argue we probably should have weaned off the offense. And I remember being in the Golding Media Center last December, and I asked Zach, and you can go back and pull that press conference up if you'd like. You know, it's like, hey, it appears you're scrapping the air raid. And he looked at me and kind of had this incredulous look on his face and said, no, a lot of the same concepts that we're going to run in the passing game are things that we're very familiar with. And they're going to be very reminiscent of the air raid. That didn't turn out to be the case. That may have been our initial intent, but that's not what we did. But if you look at what Zach did, protecting your roster from poachers, and there were plenty, and as a good friend of mine says, those same people that were tweeting out their support and condolences for the loss of Mike Leach, within seconds were texting your players. Or texting people close to them, trying to encourage them to get in the portal. Well, Zack Arnett was able to navigate through that, and we didn't lose anybody. That's important to understand. And people forget that. And we had Zavion Thomas and Tulu Griffin both go in the portal last year, and we got them both back. That says a lot about Zack Arnett and his vision for the program and the buy-in for the program and the job the Bulldog Initiative has done as well to support our program. But there should be no Zack Arnett slander. Yes, I'm unhappy with the product on the field. I'm unhappy with how the season has gone. That doesn't give me license to go out there and take a personal shot at Zack Arnett, who didn't come to us and politic for the job. We went to him, presented him an opportunity, and he accepted that opportunity. He accepted the job. And now he has not lived up to the requirements or the expectations of this job or our administration. and the demands that we have as fans when it comes to Mississippi State football, and he's been terminated for it. And he'll be well compensated for it. What is it, $4.5 million? Zack Arnett didn't lose. Zack Arnett lost some games on the field, but Zack Arnett will be okay. Zack Arnett is a fabulous person. He is a fabulous coach. And he was put into a near impossible situation in a job that he wasn't quite ready for. And we all hoped. We did. We supported him. And then we had some injuries. And sometimes I think to myself, where would we be right now if Will Rogers hadn't gotten injured? And I'm not going to sit here and say, I told you so. I'm not going to do it. But, we talked about it all through fall camp about Mike Wright. Mike could be a good package guy for us, be a good change of pace guy for us. But, we might be a bowl-eligible team with him as a starter. But he really wasn't pushing Will to be QB1. Will gets injured. Mike is thrust into the position, much like Zack Arnett. Kind of pushed him before he was ready, and he had some limitations, and you all saw it on the field. And again, I appreciate Mike Wright for his contributions to Mississippi State football. As meager as they may be, the kid played hard for us. He did. He got beat up for us last week against A&M. We put Parson in the game, and then things went south quickly. And that's not an indictment on Chris Parson. Again, we're asking him to do a job before he's ready. In addition to that, we lose Trevion Williams for the year, and we lose Calvin Dinkins for nearly the entire year. I'm still not completely sure he's going to be back, but we'll see. And so there are some things that have happened that aren't anybody's fault. It's just football. But at the end of the day, coaches are paid to win. It's as simple as that. This is not Vanderbilt. It's not about your graduation rate. It's not about your APR. It's not about player retention and degree progress requirements. It's about wins and losses. And if we're going to get where we want to get as a program, as a university, an athletic department, we have to always prioritize winning. I am the kind of person that I believe when it comes to management, and I've operated my own business in the same way, and there are sometimes you keep your mouth shut to allow people to save face. But you're always looking to upgrade. Always. And if you're not looking to upgrade, you're going to regress. Just as we saw with baseball, right? How many times do we see after the 2021 year, we were a little bit too loyal to some players that at once were kind of role players for us, but they weren't ever going to be difference makers. They were never going to be major contributors. And we were too loyal to them. And ultimately, that's the reason we're in the position we're in. Rather than hit the portal hard in 2022, we said, we got all these guys back. We won a national championship together. And with the gift of hindsight, we can always say, well, you don't want to be branded as the coach that won the national championship and then gutted your team or ran all these guys off. And it's like there's all these feelings of nostalgia. But that clearly was a mistake. And it would have been a mistake to keep Zack Arnett. We could have easily said, you know what, Steve, we've had all these injuries, and that's true, and that's fair, and yes, that's impacted our ability to put points on the board and win football games. Yes, we've had injuries. Yes, we've had alignment problems. Yes, we've had pre-snap penalties. And that's the thing, too. You go back to that Southeastern Louisiana game. We had one penalty in that game. Do you recall that? And that was a face mask on a kickoff return of a kid trying to make a play. It wasn't anything stupid. And we walked away from that game thinking, you know what, hey, it was a little bit, herky-jerky in the first half offensively. But we handled business and we committed one penalty. That's the mark of a good team. It's the mark of a well-coached team with nothing else, man. Yeah, we had some growing pains on offense, but we went out there and didn't beat ourselves. We went out there and didn't make things difficult on ourselves. We went and played a football game. And we thought, you know what, we'll be okay. We'll be okay. We'll get the offense going and things will be okay. That didn't work out for us. It didn't. And it's so interesting, too. Like, you look back in hindsight, of course, Arizona's ranked. Arizona doing a good job. And, that's a big win for us. I thought they were going to struggle to get to a bowl game this year, and they've proven to be a very good team when it's all said and done. But we beat Arizona in overtime, which is the biggest win of the season. And then we got absolutely destroyed by LSU. And I remember walking away, beginning of the year, I picked Alabama to win the West. Ultimately, they did. I'm not going to lie now. I changed horses after watching LSU play in person. I goes, you know what? LSU's got to go to Tuscaloosa. They win that game, they're going to win the West by 2 games. And what do? They lose to Ole Miss and Alabama, right? So Alabama wins the West, And again, shout out to everybody that ever had a chance to see their team win an SEC Western Division championship. What an accomplishment, right? Then we went to South Carolina knowing that was a must-win. Now, offensively, we had a good day. People forget that. It's like, we lost to South Carolina. And again, we said it then, and we all agree now. That loss, in hindsight, was terrible. It was terrible. Guys, Will Rogers threw for 487 yards in that game. 30 of 48. And we lose by 7. We play a little defense there, have a call go our way. But, offensively, we were beginning to show some signs of life. And you thought, okay, all right. We had a rough first half against Southeastern. We had a rough second half against Arizona. Had a rough game against LSU. But we put it all together for the most part offensively against South Carolina, put up 30 points. You put up 30 points in the Southeastern Conference game, you got to win that game. The next week, we get beat by Alabama. And scored 17 points in the game. And not that it's a moral victory, but we did a better job against them this year than we have in recent years. And then against Western Michigan, offensively, we played really well. I thought the play calling was good. I thought things were – I was like, okay, if this is the offense we can expect the rest of the way, we'll have a good chance to beat our contemporaries. Will Rogers, 16 of 22. 189 yards, 3 touchdowns, so it wasn't an explosive day for him. But Mike comes in late, 7 of 10, 57 yards. Seth Davis runs for 65. It's a team we run for 194. You didn't have Woody Marks in the second half of that game. And you still put up over 400 yards of offense. Our issue in that game was defensively. We just had so many lapses defensively. 440 yards of offense for us. We gave up 413. But again, you begin to feel like, okay, offensively, maybe we're getting better. Maybe we're getting better. And then Will Rogers goes down. And then Mike Wright's thrust into the starting lineup. And we go to Arkansas, and we win the game 7-3. Could have lost at 10-7, could have won at 14-3. But we win. And even then, though, you thought, okay, well, I know we probably played it pretty vanilla. We tried to shorten the game. And I thought we managed that game about as well as we could, other than the fact that we missed some plays on the field. But as far as kind of leaning on our defense, we had a great defensive performance. And you won the ball game, and even walking out that day, I even turned to Dane and I said, you know what? I don't know how the rest of the season is going to go. But I know this. I know that we came to Fayetteville, Arkansas, and we won an ugly football game. And it would have felt absolutely horrendous to lose this game. And it felt like we were going to for a second. Then we get ready to go to Auburn. And this is when things really begin to change. Now, there were already some fans out there that were already calling for change, and Arnett's over his head or whatever. I'm glad that's over with. Because if nothing else today, while it's a sad day for Arnett, it's probably a good day for Mississippi State football and probably a good day for our season. We went and played a pretty pedestrian Auburn team that had really struggled offensively. And what do? They immediately go up on us 14-3. Then we're caught chasing the game with an anemic offense. And I texted a good friend. I said, there's no way you can keep him after this. There's no way. There's just no way. That Monday, I talked to some people on campus that said, you know what, we really don't want to make a coaching change. We're still hopeful that he would figure some things out. If we get to 6-6, probably okay. If it's the right 6. You get to 7-5, you're certainly not going to make a change. You get to 6-6 with all the injuries we've had, you could make a case to keep him. If we go 5-7, you can't. I agree with most of that. And then we go score 3 points against Kentucky and really didn't show up. And I can tell you the worm really turned that weekend. A lot of the people that were on the fence about keeping Arnett and about, hey, let's give him another year, I think we'll be okay, were like, nah, I don't know how, Steve. And there are some people that write some really big checks to Mississippi State yearly. That Sunday after the Kentucky game, you're like, Steve, I can't support this anymore. I just can't. We got 3 games left to play. Barring a miracle finish, I got to reevaluate my support. I love Mississippi State, but I can't continue to support this. We find out on Sunday, and again, kind of reiterated it on Monday, that Max Johnson wasn't expected to play for A&M, and he's the number 2 quarterback. And it's like, oh, they're going to play a third-team quarterback. Guys, a third-team quarterback led them to a 51-10 win. Let that sink in for a second. Not Connor Wegman, QB1. Not even Max Johnson, former LSU starter and former A&M starter Max Johnson. A kid that hadn't played a meaningful snap of football in 2 years lit us up 51-10. At that point, I think nobody outside of his family would have supported keeping Zack Arnett. As good a guy as he is, and as difficult as the circumstances were that he took it, this simply cannot continue. On the ride home yesterday, it proved to be very scenic. I let the bride drive so I could work because we were already prepared. I told my staff last week, I said, he's going to get a chance to finish the season unless we get embarrassed by Texas A&M. Well, 51-10 is incredibly embarrassing. And so we had stories ready to go. So all day long yesterday, I'm working the phones, trying to find out what's happening. Find out that Zach Selman actually was out of state at a pre-planned event with some donors and was told nothing was expected to happen yesterday. Talked about that on the genespage.com message boards. And there's a lot of angst and unrest in the fan base. Of course, as Jimbo Fisher is announced that he is out at A&M. Boise State announces they're making a change, and people are like, well, you know what? We need to get out in front of this too. Now, I'll be honest with you. We could accomplish many of the same things we want to, even without firing Arnett yesterday or today. You know, we could still facilitate a coaching change. My concern, as I shared many times on the message board yesterday, you have 2 games left against in-state opponents that you're going to recruit against, even though Southern Miss can never beat Mississippi State for a kid State really wants. True, right? But let's be honest, most fans weren't going to come to those games. Like, you know what, I'm not going to go up there. I mean, to watch them play Southern Miss, and we may even lose a game, I'll just stay home, watch it on TV. May go ahead and get a head start on Christmas shopping, which is a little over 5 weeks away, ladies. And so you begin to think about that, and you think about, hey, Ole Miss, and you never know what the status of Jackson Dart's going to be. I don't believe for 1 second that he could have returned to the game Saturday. I don't believe that. I think that's an outright lie. And, you know, we went through the same thing when Will Rogers got hurt. You know, Zack Arnett said the same thing. He could have returned. Well, if he could have returned against Western Michigan, why hadn't he played for a month, right? And so coaches say a lot of things in press conferences. They do. And some of that's to keep some mystery, especially about quarterbacks. It hadn't worked for us, but I understand the gamesmanship. You know, you look at what happened last year at Auburn. Brian Harsin and his family, anybody you talk to will tell you they're great people, especially his wife. I've had so many people tell me she is a salt-of-the-earth type person. An absolutely wonderful person. And, of course, they tried to get Brian Harsin fired the year before. There was this discussion about, you know, an extramarital affair. There proved not to be any evidence of that. And so you knew he was a dead man walking. They were looking for an excuse to fire him. Well, they do. Matter of fact, if my memory serves me correct, it's the first thing John Cohen did when he got there was fire Brian Harsin. They elevate Cadillac Williams to be interim coach. Now, there was not any, you know, real chances of Cadillac getting the full-time gig, But what he did to inspire those young men to be Auburn men and step up to the plate and say, you know what, let's go try to salvage something of the season. My thought process is, well, let's do that at Mississippi State. Yeah, we can wait around and fire Zach the Friday after the Egg Bowl. And then, as Dave Murray says, too, you know, you probably have Zack Arnett getting booed off the field on Thanksgiving in his final game. That's probably how that would have worked out. We probably would have had a stadium full of Ole Miss fans taking over Davis Wade Stadium for the Egg Bowl, planting their flag on our field, celebrating in our locker room, leaving our town, feeling jubilant. Well, now we've avoided that. And as some of our posters have said, you know, Steve, I want what's best for the program. And it's hard to say, well, if Arnett could beat Southern Miss and beat Ole Miss and find his way into a bowl game, do you have to keep him? I think now you've removed that possibility. You've made it easier. It's like, hey, we are not pleased with the totality of the season. And that was one of the things that I was told over the course of the last 2 weeks, that we would be judged not on a single game or a single win, but on the totality of the season. These are not difficult decisions to make when you look at how anemic we've been offensively for a month now. You can counter that and say, well, you know, he's having to play with second, third team quarterbacks. I get that. And the fact that you had Braden Locke and Sawyer Robertson, who have both started Power 5 games this year, leave your program in the days following Coach Leach's untimely passing. Yeah, that wrecks your depth chart. And that's not Zack Arnett's fault. It's not like Zach's had 3 years to build a roster. And we kind of had to take what we had and kind of hope for the best. And then QB1 goes down, RB1 goes down. And we just really haven't been the same. And so now it's about Mississippi State. It's not about Zack Arnett. And Zach would have never made it about himself. But now, as a fan base, we can rally around each other. And say, you know what? We know we're going to have change. We're excited about that. We're all taking advantage of our 60% off an annual subscription price at genespage.com to follow the coaching search. But you know what? Now I think I am going to go to those games. And we need you to come to these games. We talk about what fans can do. And, of course, fans are being asked to do more and more and more and more and more. I get it. All that I'm going to ask you to do right now is have your butt in Davis Wade Stadium 2 times in the next 10 days. That's all I'm asking. I know it's 11 a.m. kick this Saturday. I'm going to encourage you, make plans to be there because your coaches, but more importantly, your players need you to be there. Yes, I understand it's Southern Miss, but this is not about the opponent. This is about our program and our team. And that was one of the things last year that you looked at Auburn and they had capacity crowds. Because of the fact they were so disenfranchised with the direction of their program, like, guys, I'll find something else to do. And it's like, hey, we're going to make change. And all of a sudden, those people answered the bell and said, you know what, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there for those kids. I'm going to be there for Auburn. We need you to be here for Mississippi State. This is an unprecedented situation. We don't fire coaches in the middle of the year. We don't. And you can run it all back all you want to. Dave Murray and I were talking about that, Brian Haydad and I as well, but what's the record for interim coaches? Matt Luke, he beat us. Joe Lee Dunn, we beat him, when he was an interim coach after the Billy Brewer scandal. Well, I guess the second Billy Brewer scandal at Ole Miss, the one that ultimately cost him his job. But it's pretty rare that we do this. Sylvester Croom got to finish the year. Of course, Dan Mullen left of his own volition. Joe Moorhead was fired after the bowl game. And you go back even before that, Jackie got to finish the 2003 season. As bad as it was, he got to finish it out. Rocky Felker got to finish it out. I mean, you could run it back. This is not a normal situation at Mississippi State. We traditionally have just waited to the end of the year and fired somebody the morning after the Egg Bowl. That's traditionally how it's been done. But now you've got a guy fired in season, and there's no scandal. There's not. It's not a situation where, Steve, there's this happened or this happened, or, there's something happened off the field. None of that. But Zach Selman made his recommendation to our administration They approved that recommendation. He made a decision to go ahead and make a move. You know what the Egg Bowl means to Dr. Keenum. We don't want to limp in there, but we need everybody that can be to be there. Because, again, this isn't about a coach. It isn't about a future coach. This is about Mississippi State. Now, we've all had varying opinions over the season, even dating back to Arnett even being elevated from interim coach to head coach. We've had a difference of opinion. I'm going to tell you now, let's all just kind of move on from that. There are going to be so many people that say, you know what, I told you so. I told you. That doesn't matter anymore. And I'm not going to tell you that either. If I've been wrong about some things, you better believe it. I've been right about some things too. It's not about assigning blame at this point or claiming credit. It's about Mississippi State. And so, yeah, we're going to write a lot of articles about it. Matter of fact, we've already written 16 articles today on a Monday. We generally do about 10 a day. We have for the last 6 weeks or so. We've written a ton of content. And we're going to do our best to navigate through this coaching search as detailed, oriented as we possibly can be. It's a new administration, so I don't know how they're going to handle things. They'll always say there's not going to be leaks. That ultimately they're always proved to be leaks. It's just what leak matters, right? So we're going to do our best to navigate through that. But it's about what's best for State now. This move, I think in the end, proved to be the only move that Zach Selman could make. I don't know about you, but I like the Egg Bowl trophy being here. I do. Now, Ole Miss is playing a lot better football than we are right now. There's no question about that. Now the health of Jackson Dart's kind of up in the air. I suspect he won't play this week against Louisiana Monroe. And then we'll see what happens on Thanksgiving. If he doesn't play, of course, you can take this week, work with Walker Howard or whoever it's going to be and kind of prep some things. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you I expect us to beat Ole Miss in the Egg Bowl. I want to beat Ole Miss in the Egg Bowl. I don't think a Zack Arnett-led team, after all that's happened this year, had any chance in that ball game. But let's say Will Rogers comes back this week, and yes, he'll be rusty. Arnett kind of teased about that today. Will's our starting quarterback. We expect him to be back next week and take every snap. Now, Greg Knox may feel differently. I don't know. I don't know what Greg will plan to do. But let's say Will comes back, works through the kinks, we get a win over Southern Miss, and maybe we look pretty good. Maybe the team comes out and says, you know what, we're going to prove it wasn't us. And then you got some juice going into the Ole Miss game at home. We'll see what happens. But I would give a Greg Knox coach team a better chance of beating an Ole Miss team than I would of Arnett. I think the A&M game is proof positive that the team had given up. And maybe you can argue they've been beaten in a submission. And maybe perhaps bringing Will Rogers back lights a fire under some of these guys. Because, listen, this is SEC West has been determined for a long time. We were never in contention for that. I mean, mathematically we were at the beginning of the year. Nobody ever expected this team a challenge for the West. We expected them to be better. We didn't think we'd be chasing a bowl game in mid-November. We thought we'd already have that handled. And there'll be some people in the SEC media say, see, I told you so. Well, yeah. It's like me saying the sun's going to come up tomorrow too, right? It's easy to say that in hindsight. Nobody knew Will Rogers would be injured and miss a month of the season. Nobody knew that Woody Marks would get injured and miss a month of the season, or we'd lose most of our two deep on the defensive line. That's got nothing to do with offensive coaching philosophy. And I think in hindsight, you look back, that was probably one of the biggest mistakes that Zach made, is rather than have kind of waning off of this or kind of having an easier transition to a new scheme the next year, maybe you put some things in place this year that are building blocks for next year. But, scrapping the air raid with an air raid quarterback and a roster that was built to run the air raid, I think ultimately cost him his job. You say, well, Steve, you just said it's about wins and losses. Yes, I think that's why their wins and losses are what they are. It's because of the changes we made offensively. There are times we look like a duck out of water. So I don't know. Bring Will Rogers back. Maybe let Will call the plays. I don't know. I'm on board with that. At this point, what do you have to lose? Let's go out here and have some fun. And I thought Greg Knox handled things well today. You know, we talk about winning the press conference, and let me tell you this, nothing, absolutely nothing that you say in a press conference is going to change anything. It's not. But I felt like Greg's attitude and demeanor today, if that's what we work with over the course of these next couple of weeks, I think you're going to be a lot happier with the product on the field. I'll tell you, back on Saturday, as we're in College Station, Texas, I was surprised, and I spoke to Stefan Krajnik about this today. You know, looking back in hindsight, even in the moment, I thought, well, Zach's awfully different. You know, after the Auburn game, after the Kentucky game, Zack Arnett was pissed off. He was. He was very angry. Guys, he wasn't angry Saturday. We just got beat by 41 points. And he comes in there and it's just kind of matter of fact about it. I think he already knew. I think he knew this was coming. I think there was an air of resignation. Hey, this is it. But he wasn't emotionally invested in postgame. And so we talk about reading body language and social cues and things like that. It was apparent to me in that postgame that things were different. In hindsight, it really makes sense. It does. Because how could a real competitor, and we know what a competitor Zach is, how could a competitor get beat by 41 points and then walk into a post-game press conference and just say, you know, be okay? Listen, many of you have never had to compete against me. I don't know many people that are more competitive than me. I don't. I don't know more people that work as hard as me or try harder than me. I don't. That's not me giving you my resume. But I hate losing. I hate losing worse than I love winning. I can't stand it when somebody gets the better of me. I can't. And maybe that's one of those deals that maybe it's a character defect of mine. Maybe I need to be more accepting of those things. But I'm just not wired that way. I'm just not. I can't stand it. And if I had gotten beat by 41 points, I may have gone in there and flipped the table over. Now, I don't know if Zach is as competitive as me. I believe that he is. But I just felt like the way that all that kind of looked, and this morning, even looking back at it, it makes sense. Got some reports last week that team really wasn't engaged in practice. They were just kind of going through the motions. And it showed on Saturday. And so Zach Selman could have sat back and said, well, you know, this is kind of the Mississippi State way. We just usually wait to the end. I think Zach Selman has an obligation to you, to me, and to everybody that loves Mississippi State to say, you know what? Hey, this thing with Zach may be over. But we're going to try to do something to salvage something from this season because our student athletes and our fans deserve better. And I respect it. I hate it for Zach. I wish things would have gone much better for Zach. I do. I like Zach as a person. I do. And I think people forget how dominant the defense was last year in the Egg Bowl. You know, Zack Arnett's a brilliant coach, and he will have another opportunity, and he will deserve another opportunity somewhere else. But I will forever be grateful to Zack Arnett for stepping up in our time of need. And I think people forget it's so easy how we move on, right? We think about it in hindsight, and it's like, you know what, Steve, you know, I don't remember it being that bad. Guys, when Mike Leach died, for a lot of us, a part of us died too. Because you love Mississippi State, and you understood what a national treasure that Mike Leach was. And I don't know if you know this, but the story that I wrote, that my friend the Pirate, I was told that it was the most read story in the history of 247 Sports. Now, that's got nothing to do with me. It just shows you what a treasure Mike Leach was and is. I was on the radio and TV for the next couple of days, and again, it wasn't about me. It's about Mike Leach. And it's so easy because familiarity breeds contempt, right? When he wasn't our coach, you only saw the sound bites, right? You only saw when he won. You saw when he put up big numbers. You're like, hey, look at Leach, man. Wouldn't it be great to have him? When you get him here, And you understand there's a lot more to the Mike Leach experience than maybe you thought. And so last year we dealt with it all year long. It's like, oh, Mike Leach should be fired, should be fired, should be fired. And we end up having one of the best seasons in school history. And just when we thought maybe we were turning the corner a little bit and said, hey, we're going to be one of the most veteran teams in the conference next year. Leach is back. Rogers is back. He'll set a new record for SEC passing. Yeah, it's going to be a historic year. And then Mike Leach goes to Brian Haydad's Christmas party on Friday, and it's the last time any of us ever see him. And it crushed us. Even the people that were the Leach critics, everybody was crushed because our collective loss reverberated throughout college football. It was an unprecedented situation. And everybody around the country is coming to our message boards, are tweeting at us and just telling all of us, man, we hate this for you guys. We love you. We're so sorry this happened. Your loss is our loss too. And we wondered, what do we do now? Well, Zack Arnett, of course, steps up and coaches us to a win against Illinois in the ReliaQuest Bowl, and probably the biggest bowl win since the Alan McKean era when we won the Orange Bowl. And we were drifting. And we were unsure of what we should do next. Well, Steve, it should be a national search. Well, the portal's about to, we've got portal things we got to worry about. What do we do? We don't have time for a search. We got signing day coming up. We got to do something quickly. And then boom, out of nowhere, I got a phone call and says, hey, what do you think? This direction we go. I remember saying then, I think it may be the only decision we can make for what's best for our program right now. Promoting Zack Arnett, in my opinion, when we did, was really the only decision we could make at that point. I think it was the best decision at the time. He protected the roster. He got us into signing day, signed a top 25 class, put a staff together. We thought, hey, we're going to run the air raid, kind of a modified air raid with a little more of a running component. And so there was optimism. And we all bought in, with few exceptions. And then the next thing you know, we start playing some games. And we thought, hey, there's some growing pains here, growing pains there. And even though we lost to LSU and Alabama, we thought, you know what, hey, we're 2-3 because we knew Carolina was a swing game. We were hoping to be 4-2 heading into that stretch in October against our contemporaries. And we thought, hey, if we can be 4-2 with Arkansas, Auburn, Kentucky, and A&M coming up, if we win a couple of those, that gives you 6. You knock off Southern Miss and Ole Miss in the Egg Bowl at home, you're at an 8-4 year. That wasn't an unreasonable expectation. And I remember saying back then, people were like, Steve, first-year coach, maybe 6-6, 7-5 is best we can hope for. And I thought, hey, with this favorable schedule and experienced roster, if we go 6-6 or 7-5, we've hired the wrong guy. I said it then and I meant it. But I'm not in any way critical of our administration for how they handled things back then. We have the gift of hindsight. We have the gift of 10 games of football now. At the time, what we were facing, we had to do something to stabilize the program. And I commend the administration for making the decision, and I commend the new administration for saying, you know what? We did what we had to do then. This is what we have to do now. And that's what leadership is. Now, I had some people tell me earlier in the year, I said, you know what, we committed to Zack Arnett. We told him we'd be patient with him. We knew there'd be some growing pains this year. But when you begin to look at next year's record and next year's potential record against that schedule, you begin to think to yourself, guys, if he's going to go 6-6 this year and 5-7 next year, we might as well go ahead and do it. If next year is going to be a rebuilding year, I'd want it be with a first-year coach than a last-year coach. Because I don't think you give him year 3, right? If he has a losing record this year, or even a 6-6 record and a losing record next year, he's not going to get year 3. So if that's understood, and that's the gift of forethought and the ability to project, I think Zach Selman really didn't have much of a decision to make. I think it all just centered around the timing. And he decided it was now. And he said, you know what? In his press conference today, we evaluate. We're always continually to evaluate. And I think he shared in our evaluation. And it doesn't matter who said it first. All that matters is where we are now. So now we begin a coaching search in earnest. And we begin to think about what's best for Mississippi State football. We've all been there before. You got big weekend plans. For some reason, it just didn't work out. Maybe life gets in the way. Maybe you want to head down to the casino. Maybe take some of their money. I like to do that. Well, MyBookie's new and improved online casino is here to change the game for you. Dive into truly realistic casino experiences featuring the latest in slots, progressive jackpots, and live dealer action, all from the comfort of your own home. Take advantage of weekly blackjack tournaments and a brand new collection of high-end games for a chance at real cash rewards. The MyBookie Casino provides a Las Vegas experience when the action's in your hands. And the best part is you don't even have to wear pants. How cool is that? Your adventure at the MyBookie Casino begins today with a generous sign-up bonus using promo code Boneyard. That's promo code Boneyard to secure yourself a sweet deposit bonus. And that's not all. Because their revamped loyalty program ensures that you'll be showered with rewards, including free spins, cashback offers, and a host of exclusive VIP perks, the more you play, the more you'll win. Play anytime, anywhere with the MyBookie Casino. Again, that's promo code Boneyard. All right, so let's begin to look ahead. I know a lot of people say, Steve, so who are we going to hire? Well, at this point, I can't tell you. I can tell you that I'll give you my opinion. Zack Arnett said a lot of boilerplate stuff today, and that's not to be critical. I mean, it's the same speech, right? No matter who or what sport, it's always, we're going to conduct a national search. Everybody says that. And in some respects, they may mean it. There are a lot of times people say we're going to conduct a national search and then hire somebody right away because there was already a deal done. I don't think there's a deal done right now for Mississippi State. That said, I do think things are going to move quickly. And here's the thing, too. We could conduct a coaching search behind the scenes without firing Zack Arnett. The one thing is there may be a candidate or two that comes across your radar now that maybe wouldn't before. You can work clandestinely, and you can talk to agents, and people within agent circles talk, because some of them talk to me, and things get out, And so I think what you got to do, I think when the noise was as loud as it was, you just pull the Band-Aid off. So here it is. Okay, boom. And it gives us the benefit of kind of getting going officially. Again, you do things behind the scenes unofficially, but now it's out there. And again, there may be a coach out there that wouldn't have been looking to make a move and says, you know what, maybe that's a good spot for me. It may give you a candidate or two. But that understood, I think you got to go get a head coach. You've got to get somebody with head coaching experience. One of the things that Dan struggled with and Joe struggled with and Zach certainly struggled with was kind of running the show. It takes a lot of clowns to run the circus. It does. And you don't know that when you first take the job. Because it's not just about recruiting, managing a roster, and game plans. If it was that simple, there'd be a lot more people that would be able to do this job and you wouldn't have to pay what we're paying. There'd be a lot more candidates out there. There would be. There's just so much more to it. And I remember this summer talking to Zach. Out there covering a camp. And I said, how's it going? How are you handling the transition? And he said this, and he wasn't complaining. Don't misunderstand. And he wasn't complaining or making any excuses. We're just two guys talking. And he goes, if it was just about coaching football and running my teams, it'd be great. And it is great. He goes, but I'm having to learn to manage my time a little bit better. He said, because, I've got to get on a plane and go fly to Washington, D.C. to lobby for NIL legislation. I got to go down to, Destin. I got to go over to Birmingham. He said, there's a lot of things they don't tell you initially. There's a lot of demands on a coach that really don't have a lot to do with managing your team. Now, of course, all these things are football related, peripherally. Right? NIL is a big deal. We need to have a level playing field nationally in the NIL. I think we all agree in that. And so, you got to go up there for whatever that's worth and go up there and go with the SEC coaching contingent. as a show of force and of concern to the lobbyists and say, hey, we're here taking time out of our schedule because this issue is important to us. Now, I don't know if that's going to win us another football game, but it's a requirement of the gig. There's a lot of alumni functions that coaches are invited to. A lot of times they got to say no. And I know everybody out there wants, hey, we want to get Arnett. We'd love to get Arnett. We'd love to have Coach Jans. We'd love to have Coach Simonis. And you don't understand that it's not just you asking. It's the Birmingham Alumni Association asking. It's the Orlando Alumni Association asking. It's Biloxi. It's Jackson. It's New Orleans. And all of a sudden you look at that schedule and you wonder why we do the Road Dogs tour. It's like, hey, let's just kind of get all of our misery at one time. And I hate to characterize it that way, but for a coach, every day you have to spend away from your team or the recruiting aspect of things, it's a distraction. It's a necessary distraction. And so you need to be able to bring in a coach that already understands those opportunities and can maximize those opportunities to help push the brand. It doesn't need to be seen as an obligation, but it's an opportunity. And when you bring somebody up from the coordinator level or a G5 level, especially the coordinator level, they just don't understand that because they've had that buffer. They've had a head coach that's always done the dog and pony show. And now you have to do all that stuff. And it's like, oh, we got to go to this dinner on Thursday. Oh, that was the day I was going to do this and do that. Well, then you're constantly playing catch up. One of the things that I think really helped Mike Leach, when they got here is, number one, Mike had already been a head coach at multiple locations. And so before Mike even shows up, he has Dave Emmerich and Brittany Thackeray already on the ground. They're here kind of conducting Leach football business. When you're the guy that's getting promoted or you're the guy that gets his first job, you don't have that chief of staff. You may want that person, you don't even know who they are. And they don't know the job either. And so maybe you bring somebody in that you know and you trust, maybe they're a friend. And I'm not a big proponent of doing business with friends. Because I don't want to have to fire a friend. I would, and I have. But I don't like doing business with friends. When Dan Mullen got hired, Dan had trouble putting a staff together. Did you know that? Dan Mullen, people forget. You go back and look at that first staff of Dan Mullen's. And let's do that, right? Let's take a look. Okay, so Mullen brings Hevesy. Hevesy was the co-offensive line coach with Adazio at Florida. Hevesy used to be the full offensive line coach. They bring in Adazio. So Hevesy was somewhat disenchanted, was happy to make the move with Dan, and that was one of the first hires Dan made. And he said, hey, he's just an offensive line coach, a little bit gruff at times, but he'll do a good job for us. And he did. And there's Mark Husband, who was an administrative hire that the athletic department hired. HUD, lifelong Bulldog. We needed some assistant coaches to come in here that kind of knew us a little bit, but HUD was not a Mullen hire. HUD was an athletic department hire. Tony Hughes, of course, was a guy that we've known well, right? And a guy that we needed to bring in, and we did. And a guy that has been with us for a long time. But Tony was a guy too, an electric recruiter at Ole Miss. Andre Orgeron, then he was down there at Southern Miss. We bring him back up here to Mississippi State, a place that he wanted to be all along. He came to interview with us, with Coach Kroom, and didn't get the gig. And then went to Ole Miss, and Orgeron hired him, and he killed us. And then we hired Greg Knox. That was a Mullen hire, and you look at Greg Knox, it's crazy. Greg spent basically his entire career either coaching for Tommy Tuberville or Dan Mullen. Very loyal guy. But that was a Mullen hire. Les Kenning. Of course, Les had some big years in Alabama. Les also an athletic department hire. Not a Dan Mullen hire. Supposed to be your quarterback and offensive coach, offensive coordinator. And then there's Scott Sowich, a guy that played with Dan Mullen, bring in a friend, and then ultimately take him off the field and put DJ Looney in his spot. Then there's Carl Torbush, defensive coordinator. Again, essentially an athletic department hire. Of course, Dan had to sign off on all this stuff. But we had to kind of help put this thing together. Of course, then there's, Melvin Smith, David Turner, They were holdovers from the recruitment administration. But, so Dan is, you look back in hindsight, and people forget that even Dan Mullen, the great Dan Mullen, who had so many great years, in the beginning had a difficult time putting a staff together. So when you're that guy, when you're the guy that is getting to be a head coach for the first time, knowing who your staff is going to be and who you can put on the ground while you navigate through all this is very important. And the truth of the matter is when you're having to depend on other people to help you do that, you don't know if it's going to be a good fit, but you do what you have to do. And that's the danger with hiring a first-year coach. When you hire an existing coach, whether they be at the G5 level or at the P5 level, they've already got a staff together, and more times than not, they bring those people with them, especially on the support side. Because there's just so many moving parts to all this, right? You got to have somebody keep the schedule. You got to have somebody that's going to handle all the administrative things that you don't have to. It's a much different dynamic. And that's the thing, too, about bringing in a G5 guy. Yes, you have the staff, but I worry about from a recruiting standpoint. I think about this in baseball all the time. And it certainly applies in football. Basketball is a little bit different because almost everything now in basketball is NIL-driven, just about all of it. But, it's like people say, hey, let's go get this mid-major coach. He's tearing it up. I always worry about the gimmicky G5 guy, whether it be in baseball or in football. And the reason that I say that is because do they know an SEC player when they see one on the high school level? And then do they know what it takes to recruit that player to your school? Because where you've been in the past when you say, hey, we love this kid. He's 50 miles down the road from us. We're going to offer him. And the next thing you know, you offer him, and then Florida State offers him, and Tennessee offers him. Well, then you just kind of withdraw, right? Because you kind of know the branding of your program and say, you know what, we're going to recruit this kid, but we're not going to go out there and allocate a bunch of resources to get this guy because we know we're not going to beat Florida State and Tennessee for him. Does the new coach have what it takes to get out and fight in the streets for an SEC football player against SEC teams? That's the real question. And we've seen it in the past. You've had some recruiting dynamos that couldn't coach. Right? You saw what Ed Orgeron did at Ole Miss, right? Everybody's like, hey, we got to improve our recruiting. So Pete Boone and them go out there and hire Ed Orgeron, who Rivals had said was the top recruiter in the country. What does he do? He comes in and kind of loads up the roster, couldn't win. And then Houston not inherited a very talented roster and went to a couple of Cotton Bowls. And then Houston and those guys couldn't recruit at the same level. And then they're gone. And so we've got to have a guy that can handle both components of the job. Yes, they know what it takes to identify and recruit and sign these players, but also to develop them into a cohesive unit where they consistently perform at a high level. You've got to have a great identifier and recruiter of talent and a great developer and retainer of talent. And that's difficult for a first-year head coach. It is. I don't care how smart you are. I don't care how well educated you are. I don't care who all you've worked for. I don't care what your coaching pedigree is. Until you've had to do it, you don't know how to do it. And you're going to make some mistakes. And so the best thing for Mississippi State is to identify an individual that is already got a proven track record of being able to do this. Listen, I see all the names too. It's like, oh, this guy's so great. And what's funny is you're talking to my friends in agent and coaching circles. I run some names by people, and I'm not going to mention the names. But I was like, hey, what about this guy at this school? And you're like, oh, well, that's not even his offense. Well, I thought he was an offensive-minded coach. He is, but his offensive coordinator is the guy. He's the guy. The head coach just kind of stays out of the way. It's the OC you want, but you don't want him as your head coach. And so it's important to understand the dynamic of the G5 coaching talent pool. There are some guys out there that have done a great job no matter where they've been. They've had some adjustments over time with staff and then had some continued success. It's important to understand that. I don't want the guy that struggled, and then all of a sudden hired an OC, and then things take off. Oh, they got it figured out. Well, do they have it figured out, or does the new OC have it figured out? And that's a challenge I think Zach Selman has, is you've got to look through all that through your vetting process, because I'm going to tell you, this search committee, and I understand how important they are. I get it, because they're going to tell you the hot names in coaching, but you've got to do your own due diligence. You can't just depend on these coaching firms, these search firms, to help you navigate the search. Because I'm going to tell you this, they're going to promote, and just like we saw in men's basketball, they're going to promote a ton of candidates that maybe you're not interested in. They're going to give you a list of all this person. There's going to be some people on this list because of this reason and this reason. That doesn't mean it's the best individual for Mississippi State. And there are going to be some people out there, too, that have a vested interest in their friend getting a job. And maybe it's to their friend's best interest, but not to Mississippi State's best interest. We've seen that happen a couple times in sports. You know, we go out there and we chase somebody, and, hey, listen, I got somebody I want to promote. And listen, you take those calls, but you got to understand, too, some of those are very self-serving, right? And so it's a real challenge, but to me, the preferred candidate would have a few attributes that I think that our current coaching staff doesn't. Head coaching experience, preferably on the Power 5 level. Now, are we going to be able to go hire a sitting Power 5 coach? The chances of that are pretty slim. You say, but Steve, we've never done that. Well, we did with Mike Leach. We took him away from Washington State. They also have the lowest budget in the Power 5. They couldn't match us dollar for dollar. It's true. So you'd like to have somebody with head coaching experience because they've got to know how to run the show. We can't have this learning curve, especially where we are right now. And again, this is typically when the silly season begins. And you've got some important dates to consider, right? Because the recruiting calendar, once we get through the Saturday of the regular season, in-home visits open up. Now, yes, we can take our current assistant coaches and we can, deputize them to go back out and recruit for us. We can put Rod Gibson on the road. We can put Brad Peterson on the road. We can do things like that. People that we know are beholden to our program to go out and recruit. But, they can't tell a recruit, hey, this is the kind of offense we're going to run. And, yeah, I know that you're a tweener and maybe you're a safety or a backer, and here's how you fit in the new scheme. So the sooner you get that handled and get coaches hired, the better off you're going to be. And so that's an important date to consider. And everybody says, well, we're not going to hire somebody until their season's over. Well, how many coaches do you know that aren't involved in conference championship games that hang around for a bowl game? They're not going to. They're not. And so let's say, for an example, that we are closing in on a hire Egg Bowl night or that weekend, right? Chances are our coach is going to be coaching somewhere that Saturday. And ideally, you'd love to be able to introduce them here that Monday. Now, if they're playing for a conference championship game, that's going to go another week. You may have a deal in place, but you're going to let that guy coach in that championship game. I mean, you don't ever see that happen, really. But you don't see people that aren't playing for something meaningful say, hey, well, I want to hang around and go coach a Liberty Bowl. That just doesn't happen. They just go ahead and hire an interim coach because that bowl game doesn't matter. If they're in the playoff, they're going to want to continue to be part of that. And so that's something to consider too. And we have to make the best decision that is long-term, in the long-term interest of Mississippi State. We can't say, hey, we have to have a guy by this date when the right candidate maybe has to play a little bit longer. Now, all that understood, that might preclude some guys because of the fact that, the portal is a real and present thing, and it opens the Monday after Championship Saturday. And yes, you would have some opportunities to recruit your players back, but you'd like to prevent them from getting in the portal if you could. And a lot of people will say, you know what, I'm going to get in the portal and see who they hire, and I'll see maybe what I can get. And then it becomes a much more expensive proposition for you. Now, I have been given some numbers about Bulldog Initiative that I believe are accurate. I'm not going to share them here today. But I'm encouraged, and I've been a guy that's beat the drum since the beginning. Not to say that we should stop, but I believe we are in the best position we have ever been in when it comes to NIL and football fundraising. The numbers that I have been given are very encouraging. Are we where we want to be? No. But are we better off than most people think we are? You better believe it. We're in a good spot. Not in a great spot, not in a bad spot. Now, other people go out there and act like that we're going to have to shop it dirt cheap, to make life work for us. And that's just not the case. But in order to save some of that money, we need to have a coach here that can sell his vision. Because there may be some guys out there that are encouraged, hey, you need to go get in the portal just to be sure you got something, right? Because you never know, the new coach may come in here, maybe he's going to run a scheme that doesn't fit you, and you'll be stuck there, wasting your eligibility, right? Well, then they get in the portal, and then within 24 hours, you got 50 schools contacting them and say, hey, we can give you this, we can give you that. And you're like, hey, well, coach, I'd love to come back. However, I went in the portal, and this school offered me $100,000 to transfer. And so I want to stay here, but I really need that $100,000. And right now, many of you, like your stomach is churning because, listen, I get it. I feel the same way. But that's the reality of what we face. And it's legal. And so the sooner we get a coach hired, the sooner we can get into the homes of recruits and also have an opportunity to begin to build some relationships and really just kind of remove some anxiety from the roster. It's like, hey, you're our guy. Now, there's a lot of names out there. There's a huge funnel of names, and it's only going to get bigger and bigger and bigger in the couple days, right? By the end of the week, we may be talking 50 people. And we put up a hot board today, got some names that we believe in and some ones that we know are just kind of names connected to the search through previous relationships or whatever. And we'll begin to eliminate those, right? We put that up. The first board's always the, the one that is very comprehensive. And it doesn't matter. I remember when we put up the pitching coach board. I remember just like it was yesterday. We put out the pitching coach search board. We'd never done that before. We thought we'd make a big deal out of it. And we had Justin Parker on our initial hot coaching search board. And I remember as soon as people were like, oh, these names are so gross. And then we ended up hiring Justin Parker. People forget the fact we had him on the first hot board. You'd always like to do that, and more times than not, we do. Doesn't always work out that way, because especially in football, because there's just so many names involved. But all that said, we're going to work through this process. And we're going to have updates over at genespage.com on a daily basis. And I don't know how Zach Selman works yet. I don't. I admit it right now. This is the first search I've ever had to cover that he facilitated. And, Zach and I have a good relationship. But I also know, too, that, it's not the relationship that I have with Scott Strickland or John Cohen. I hadn't known him long enough, right? And so I don't know what he's going to be willing to share. I don't know what people around him are going to be willing to share. And there have been times in the past people have given me names and we floated them out there and to get reaction. Hey, what do you guys think about this? Oh, I hate that guy, whatever. Not that we're conducting a poll, but there are a lot of times out there people want to know, what's the reaction? I can't count the times that people would say, hey, what are our fans talking about these days? Who are the names they're talking about? What would excite the fan base? You got to make decisions that are best for your program, but you also, too, you have to be cognizant of the fact that the stockholders in your athletics department, maybe they don't get a say, but they do have an opinion. And sometimes it's important to listen to that. Even if you don't agree with it, I think it's important to understand that they're like, hey, I would love this coach. And I remember when Justin Parker's name, when it got really serious, because we put him on the hot board and had people say, you know what, he's not going to make a move this year. And I remember the week before things got hot, I had a source in college baseball that said, you know what, this whole thing with there may be a shakeup at South Carolina, that whole staff may be leaving, and Justin doesn't want to go to Miami. So he's kind of looking around. And the next thing you know, Justin Parker and his wife are on a plane to Starkville. And so things change as the college coaching carousel spins. People have to decide, what is best for my family? right? Do I want to make that trip from Washington State to Mississippi State with Mike Leach? Well, ultimately, everybody but one coach did. And the one that stayed behind wasn't one that they chose to retain. And so that was a pretty tidy undertaking. It didn't take us a lot of time, effort, and trouble. Of course, it requires a lot of phone calls. And sometimes we get it and sometimes we don't. But I think it's important that we don't have this piecemeal approach to putting a staff together. And I think that's another big part of hitting the recruiting ground running, is to have a cohesive staff that already has a relationship together. And so then they in turn come here as a group and get right to work. Rather than, okay, I've got my chief of staff here, my friend from junior college or whoever, and then I've hired somebody that I knew from my days in high school that I've always loved, that have no clue what they're doing. And then, okay, we're going to hire this coach and that coach, and I got to interview this coach. I mean, you want to spend that time recruiting and not having a piecemeal of staff together. We went through some of that with Joe Moorhead too. People forget, when Joe Moorhead took the job, there was already kind of an agreement of who the DC was going to be. And then that person backed out. And we hired Bob Shoup, which ended up being okay, for sure. But I think it's important for our fans to understand that, when you go hire the first year head coach, when you go get the coordinator, it makes all of this staffing so much more difficult. Because number one, you don't have a network like a sitting head coach does. You don't have people that are already beholden or loyal to you. And there may be people out there in the past who say, hey, when I ever get a head coaching job, I want you to be one of my coordinators. You're like, oh, yeah, sure, Joe. You whatever. Yeah, we'll do that. And then when the time comes, you're like, you know what? I don't know if I want to go to Mississippi State or if I want to leave Michigan, right? That happens. But like with Mike Leach and his crew, hey, it's like Mike shows up, brings the entire offensive staff with him, approaches Rocky Long, approaches a few other people, and we get Zack Arnett. And I would venture to say Zack did a good job for us. And at times, the defense was downright dominant. And other times, not so much. But Leach had a network. Leach had a staff. And, of course, he brings in Darcel McBath, and everybody will tell you, that's a Leach guy if there ever was one. So there wasn't much question about Darcel coming, and I was excited about Darcel coming. I thought it was huge, for Darcel to come. And you kind of start putting this thing together. And even then, there were some challenges. And so you want the new coach to have the opportunity to focus on football first. And that's why I think it's so important to get a sitting head coach. It doesn't matter to me if they're from the G5 level or the Power 5 level. And again, the chances of us going out and landing a Power 5 coach are tough. Let's just call it for what it is. But I don't think we have to go do the poor old Mississippi State thing and let's just go out there and hire a coordinator and hope for the best. This is an important recruiting class for us, but no class is more important than the health of our program. Not when you got the benefit of the portal. And even though we've struck out at times in the portal, you can get players. And you may not be able to get the high school players you want after transition, but you've got the ability to kind of replenish your roster, which previous coaching staffs have not had that opportunity to do. And that's important to understand too. But I will forever be grateful to Zack Arnett for stepping up and doing what we needed him to do as best he could. He just simply didn't win enough. I don't think any less of him as a coach or a person. And I think it'd be pretty cool, man. I really do. If our fans took to Twitter, even though Zack hadn't been on Twitter in a long time, and a lot of that too, I don't blame him. But if our fans just kind of messaged to me, thanks, Zack. Thanks. No disclaimers needed. You don't have to have a caveat and said, well, Coach, we just didn't win enough. Coach, thanks for stepping up when we needed you. Period. I think that'd be a really cool thing. I texted Zack a little bit earlier. I didn't get a response. I don't expect to get one. I didn't send a text expecting to get a response. But I sent a text earlier today thanking Zach for his contributions to Mississippi State. And Hunch, I appreciate everything he did and tried to do for Mississippi State football. And, again, he didn't win enough, but I'm not walking away bitter or angry at Zack Arnett, and I don't think anybody should. At least from our fans. None of our fans should look at it and say, oh, I'm so glad. It's like all this stuff, like the people, like we're relieved today because now we know, right? The Jimbo Fisher thing is much different. We're going to talk about it a little bit before we get out of here. The people at A&M were so sick and tired of Jimbo Fisher, they could not wait for him to be fired. Right? I mean, 4 losses in all but one season. Yeah, I mean, that's not what they signed up for. It was a big coup when they got him, but they didn't get the return on the investment. So I understand all the pent-up frustration and angst that comes out. That's just not the case here. Zack Arnett should not be criticized in the way that Jimbo Fisher is. And Jimbo, if I'm Jimbo Fisher, you never see me again. With the amount of money he's going to get, it's great work if you can get it. But Jimbo Fisher had worn out his welcome at A&M. Zack Arnett was the guy that tried to do an impossible job under some very difficult circumstances when we needed him the most. All right, let's take a look at the weekend it was in the Southeastern Conference. It was blowout Saturday in the SEC. Pretty crazy stuff. None of these games were competitive. None. Maybe with the exception of Florida LSU, where that ultimately ended up being LSU putting up 52 points on Florida. What a great year this LSU offense is having. But, it started Alabama 49-21 winners over Kentucky. Guys, that game was over in the first quarter. It was. And we talked last week, Kentucky only has 2 wins all time against Alabama. And it's been a long time since the Tide has been to Kroger Field. They removed all doubt and had the West clinched before Ole Miss took the field. There were so many people talking about the Ole Miss-Georgia game was the biggest game in Ole Miss history. I don't know that I agree with that. I think the 2003 game between Ole Miss and LSU, when Eli Manning buckled under the pressure, probably the biggest game in school history. And so Ole Miss holds the distinction. And some of you, for some reason, I guess maybe you're beholden to too many Ole Miss friends in your life that we're not supposed to discuss that. Guys, we can have a bad season and have strong opinions about other teams. That doesn't preclude us, because of the fact that we're struggling and we just fired our coach, that we can't have an opinion. And I've got a strong opinion about this. Ole Miss holds the distinction of being the only team from the 1992 expansion. We went to 6-team divisions. The only team in the history of the SEC West from 1992 to not make an SEC championship game is Ole Miss. And yes, we're going to comment on that. And if you don't like it, then you can learn to live with it. Because yes, we're going to point that out. Well, Steve, we only went one time. Yeah, but at least we went, right? I'd rather be, a has-been than a never was. I say, but Steve, they're having a better year than us. So? And even in their dream season, they couldn't get it done. Once again, Ole Miss proves that they're in neighborhoods they don't belong, as Georgia beats them 52-17. 52-17. Guys, it was a 14-14 game, and then you look up, and it's 28-14 at the half, and then in the second half, Georgia outscores them 24-3. They didn't touch Carson Beck. He did whatever he wanted to do. And again, this Georgia team has been kind of up and down this year. And you look up, they're still 10-0. They're still headed back to Atlanta. It's crazy. It is. And the same thing can be said for Alabama. Beginning of the year, we thought this was a vulnerable Alabama team. And all of a sudden, you look up and their only loss is to Texas. And we had this discussion on the genespage.com message board yesterday. If Alabama wins out, they're going to playoff. And say, well, Texas, that doesn't matter. If Alabama wins out, and they should, is they host UT Chattanooga and then travel to Auburn, and they should win both of those games handily. Of course, you throw the record books out in a rivalry game. But if they find a way to beat Georgia, they're in the playoff. And if Texas wins out and Alabama wins out, I'm voting Alabama ahead of Texas. Because that win over Georgia is loud. South Carolina all over Vanderbilt 47-6. We expected that to be a game that Carolina would win with some ease. Probably not that much. Carolina offense has been good the last couple weeks. And again, I go back to the beginning of this. After week 2, I told you guys Vanderbilt's done winning football games, and they are. Missouri. I picked Tennessee in this game. I don't know. Eli Drinkwitz maybe get tired of us doubting the Tigers. 36-7. They did Tennessee. Missouri now will finish second in the SEC East. Crazy. Auburn goes to Arkansas and just absolutely mops the floor with Arkansas, 48-10. And just last week, I had people telling me Arkansas Sam Pittman's okay. Now people are like, you know what? The process has already begun. We're going to move on. And I think some of that may involve Gus Malzahn, so we'll see. And, of course, that impacts the Mississippi State search. I'd love to have Gus Malzahn, to be honest with you. I would. He fits the criteria. SEC coaching experience, Power 5 coaching experience, a staff that's already in place. I think it's all big. But if Arkansas wants him, I think Arkansas gets him. And we mentioned the LSU offense. You know, Jaden Daniels, a lot of people were a little bit curious if he's going to play. This was quite a tussle for a while. And then that second half, LSU just kind of took over and said, you know what, we're done with this. This game is over. The second half, 35 points for the LSU offense. 35. That'll get it done. That will get it done. And, of course, Jaden Daniels just absolutely destroying the LSU record books. Jaden Daniels may be your Heisman Trophy winner. It's not him or Michael Penix. It's nuts. Bo Nix in the mix, too. But 17-26 for 372 yards and 3 touchdowns, and then ran for 234. You talk about a big moment there. My gosh. It's nuts, man. Over 600 yards of offense responsible by one guy that was probable in the game. It's absolutely crazy to think about the numbers they put up in this game. The LSU offense, and it's a shame that they won't get a chance to play for something more substantial, and they're losing a ton. So your winners last week, Alabama wraps up the West. South Carolina keeps their thin bowl hopes alive. Missouri solidifies themselves as the second best team in the East. Auburn, now bowl eligible and jockeying for position. Georgia clinches the SEC East. LSU trending towards a potential New Year's Six bowl game. Texas A&M bowl eligible now, but will do so with an interim coach. Let's take a peek ahead at Week 12 in the SEC. As I mentioned, UT Chattanooga will travel to Alabama. That's going to be interesting. Louisiana Monroe at Ole Miss. Will Jackson Dart play? Will he not? We don't know yet. I would hold him out, but that's just me. Southern Miss, of course, at Mississippi State. Your Bulldogs, a 14-point favorite in the game. I think the only way that happens if Will Rogers plays and plays near his capabilities. Abilene Christians at A&M, that'll be a blowout of epic proportions. Georgia will travel to Tennessee. Now, will Georgia play this game as Fat Cats? I think not. It's not just about winning the East. For Georgia, it's about winning an AFL championship. But that'll be a fun game. That's the 2:30 game. So as we're wrapping up with Southern Miss, we can get home in time to catch the tail end of that. New Mexico State's at Auburn. That should be a big win for Auburn as they prepare for the Iron Bowl. Florida's at Missouri. Billy Napier and those guys say they're firmly confident in their future. Hey, Florida, I don't know that I agree. I don't know that Florida wins another game. FIU is at Arkansas. Arkansas needs to win that one and then find a way to upset Missouri to make anything of this season. You know, they're 3-7 right now, and you know, could potentially backdoor into a bowl game at 5-7, as could we. Kentucky's at South Carolina. I'm eager to see how Kentucky responds in this ball game. This is a primetime game between two very mediocre teams. I'd like to see South Carolina win the game. I would. Georgia State's at LSU. Another chance for LSU to pad the stats. And we'll take a look at the SEC standings here. We know where we rank. We're 6th by virtue of a tiebreaker over Arkansas. They're 3-7 overall. We're 4-6, and still the possibility to get bowl eligible for your Bulldogs. Auburn now 6-4 overall and bowl eligible, 3-4, a game behind Texas A&M, who's also 6-4. And then LSU, 7-3, 5-2 in the league. Ole Miss, by virtue of beating LSU, has the tiebreaker and the better overall record. You look at this Ole Miss team and you think, hey, they're probably looking at a 10-2 or perhaps a 9-3 record. And then Alabama, 7-0 in the conference, 9-1 overall. Good chance that the Crimson Tide ends the regular season 11-1 and headed to a nice bowl occasion. And again, if they win the SEC championship, they certainly could, they're in the playoff. Vanderbilt 0-7, 2-9 in the overall. And again, you look at them, this thing is about over, right? As well as it should be. It's crazy to look at this Vanderbilt team. I don't think Clark Lea's in any danger by any stretch of the imagination, but they will have an open date this weekend and then play at Tennessee next weekend. That'll be a loss and wrap up a 2-10 season for them. South Carolina is 2-5 and now clinging to their postseason hopes. Again, they need to win out. It's going to be difficult to do. They get Kentucky and then they host Clemson. Could South Carolina win out and get bowl eligible? They could. They've had a lot of injuries, especially in the offensive line. But a week ago, I don't know if I would have said that, or 2 weeks ago. But South Carolina is still in the mix. Florida at 5-5. Florida, of course, this week plays Missouri, and then Florida State next week. Staring 5-7 right in the face. Kentucky 6-4, bowl eligible. But also, when you look at this Kentucky team, it's South Carolina and then Louisville. At Louisville. So, yes, bowl eligible. But, again, you look at that, look at the totality of things. And, again, Mark Stoops being mentioned in connection with some other jobs like Michigan State and perhaps even Iowa if Kirk Ferentz moves on at Iowa. Tennessee 7-3 overall, 3-3 in the league. Missouri a game ahead of them at 4-2. And by virtue of the tiebreaker, it's going to be almost impossible to catch them. And Missouri, a chance to go 10-2 this year. Yeah, let that sink in for a second, right? A team that many people thought would be 500, including myself. That's a surprise of the league. That's the story of the SEC this year is the Missouri Tigers and, of course, the Georgia Bulldogs. 7-0 and 10-0 overall. And, this Georgia team, you keep saying it, but Kirby Smart keeps getting these guys up to play. A lot of people thought Ole Miss could slip in between the hedges and turn this thing into a shootout. And Georgia's like, game on. And again, breaking news, Ole Miss, the only team in the SEC West from the 1992 invention of the SEC championship game to never go to Atlanta. Texas A&M didn't either, but they didn't join the league until 2012. So Ole Miss, congratulations. It's a very dubious distinction. I know we have some Ole Miss fans listen to this show, so let me congratulate you. Perhaps go put that right next to your 2003 fake co-SEC West champion banner in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium. And yes, we will continue to talk about it. And if you're one of those delicate Mississippi State fans, well, Steve, we shouldn't say anything. You're wrong. We're going to say something. And we've earned the right to say it because we've been to Atlanta. And maybe someday we'll get back. It won't be as an SEC West champion because of the fact the divisions go away. But anytime that we've done something and they haven't, we're going to talk about it. They talk about how we've never been to a Sugar Bowl, and it stings because it's true. They've never been to an Orange Bowl. We don't talk about that enough. We've been multiple times. But all that said, this season will soon come to a painful end here at Mississippi State. Of course, the Band-Aid's now ripped off. And the thing that I think about, if Zack Arnett had stayed, and let's say somehow we beat Southern Miss and upset Ole Miss. And again, with Jackson Dart's health in question, you never know what that team's going to look like. And we made a bowl game. And let's say we went 6-6 and went to the Birmingham Bowl. You wouldn't have bought tickets. But you might now. Now when you think about it and say, you know what? Hey, I can support this because I know change is coming. Because I'm there for these kids. I'm there for these players. I'm there for Mississippi State. And so again, I'm going to make my plea and I'm going to do it all week long. Please come to the game this week and next week. Please come be a part. We need you. We do. We need you as a Mississippi State family to come together. Again, it's not about who's right or wrong or when we were right or when we did this, whatever. Now it's all about the future. It's all about what's best for Mississippi State football. Zach Selman decided that the best decision for us was to make the decision to move away from Zack Arnett and to do that today. I fully support the decision. I fully support our administration. And I fully support all of you. As I've said on this show many, many times, I am for Mississippi State and everybody else that is for Mississippi State. And I support all of their coaches until they are no longer our coaches. And it was difficult for me to do that with Ben Howland. I thought he should have been fired long before he was. But I was fair to Ben down the stretch. Even had some people in the administration call me and say, I think you've been fair to Ben. I wish Ben would have been fair to us and done a better job. But again, this situation with Zach was not one of his choosing. He elected to take on a responsibility to help us through a very difficult time, and he's done that. Things did not go the way we had hoped, and so now we move forward as a family, and we wish Zack Arnett the best. He has a very bright future ahead of him, and now he also has a pretty nice bank account with about $4.5 million of our money. It's good work if you can get it, and we wish Zack Arnett the absolute best. Reminder, too, if you hadn't done so, go to whenthebottomfalls.com. You can pre-order the new book. It'll be delivered to the warehouse a week from today, thereabouts. So you should have books in your mailboxes next week. They'll come in here, and then I'll go sign them, and they'll begin to ship them and get them out. If you have any issues, feel free to reach out to me. The best thing to do is to hit that Contact Us link on the website. But if you have any issues getting a response, hit me up, and I can also reach out to folks. Excited for you to have this. I want to thank everybody that turned out last Thursday night. Had a chance to share some experience, strength, and hope with some people in the world of recovery. And I don't advertise those events because it's not about me. It's about recovery and about, I don't want it to be a situation where Mississippi State people just kind of show up for the fun of it. I want it to be about the people that are seeking a life of recovery. And so a lot of people I know are involved with Celebrate Recovery, and you're not addicts. You're just doing what you can to be of service, and I appreciate that. And everybody out there that, whether you be in law enforcement or whatever, they're working hard to try to get people into programs of recovery. Thank you very much for doing so. You are my people. Thank you again very much. We'll be back on Wednesday. And there will be no media opportunities for football the rest of this week. All the focus will be on getting the team ready for Southern Miss. And we'll begin posting some updates over at genespage.com. Remind you, 60% off the annual subscription rate. We started running a promotion today. It's been a very, very big day for us, as you could imagine, content-wise, but also, too, traffic-wise on the site. And so we're giving you one of our best deals ever to come be a part of that. That's at genespage.com, the Mississippi State affiliate for 247 Sports. Until next time, let's all live our lives in a way we make more friends than enemies, and people can see a difference in the way we live.